Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Bowman. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Thank you for joining today's virtual Lunch and Learn. I Have a Voice, Please Listen, featuring Loretta Claiborne. This is a recorded session, as Amanda had mentioned, so please be respectful and place yourself on mute during the presentation. And if you have any questions, please place them in the chat, and we will try to address them at the end of the presentation. Loretta, a Special Olympics athlete, woman of faith, and a gifted motivational speaker, shares her life story that carries a heartfelt message of acceptance and hope worldwide for all people with different abilities. Loretta was born with physical and intellectual disabilities and did not walk or talk until 4 years old. Doctors told her mother that Loretta belonged in an institution because she would never survive in the quote unquote regular world. Her mother refused and chose to raise her the same as her other children. Despite her different abilities, which led to years of strife, she credits Special Olympics as the positive force that turned her life around. Early on, Loretta discovered a passion for running and has completed 26 marathons, including the Boston Marathon, with her personal best of 3 hours and 3 minutes. Some of her noted accolades included the SB Arthur Ashe Award for Courage, holds 3 honorary doctorate degrees, and was recently recognized as US Today's 2023 Woman of the Year. Her life's contributions are immeasurable. Loretta shared her message with many world leaders and influencers and continues to champion worldwide inclusion for all persons with different abilities. I would like to share a short video that highlights Loretta's story.
I just love buses. I know a lot of people hate buses, but I don't drive. And like the old thing says, you either driving up to us, ride the bus. Probably could write a story about the bus. My name is Loretta Claiborne. I was born and raised right here in York, Pennsylvania. I didn't always have a voice. Everybody wants to have a voice, but when you're the kid that's always pushed away, it makes it tough. My mother fell down the step when she had me. And I was born blind, didn't walk to the age of 4. I probably wouldn't go to school. I probably wouldn't be able to read. Don't even think about getting a diploma. I remember sitting at the table and my mom would say, "Oh, Stella, you're going to be really good at this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that." And then it'll get to Debbie. "Oh, yeah, Debbie, you're going to do really well." And I said, "What about me?" And she said, "You're just going to be Loretta." You know, that's kind of sad. And I would just hang my head down. I said, why do I have to just be me? What happened to me, I got angry. So I didn't have to use my voice. I used my fists. And that's how I thought maybe I would communicate to get by. As I got into going to high school, I was having to struggle because I couldn't read that well, or I didn't fit in. The kids looked at me and said, "Hey, you, Special Eddie, we don't know retards in this class." And I got in trouble again. I took a hammer to a guy. Call comes on the intercom. "Can Loretta Claiborne please show up at the Gilreath's office?" He got me settled down. He said to me, "Loretta, you can't live your life like this. You got to learn that your feet will take you more places than using your fists." And I didn't know it, that something was going to happen that was going to change my life. Hand me a paper. I couldn't even read it. I remember the word Olympics. I started running in 1966, so nobody really cared, but Mr. Lee, he had a pill that worked, and it didn't come out of a bottle. It was the York County Special Olympics, 1970. This coach came to me and says, "Well, Loretta, what do you want to run? Do you want to run 100, or do you want to run the 50-yard dash?" I shook my shoulders. Why should I speak? Nobody cared. What was the purpose? He says, "Loretta, you have a mouth, and I want you to use it." And I think that was a turning point in my life. my advocate. He says, Loretta, I think you can speak. And I said, why do you want me to talk to people? I said, I don't talk to people. Who cares about people like me? She says, Loretta, you can really help. She took me out to Monroeville, PA. I walked in the room and I looked around, looked at people. I'm standing there in my little thrift shop dress. And then I started speaking. It just came out. I didn't have a note in my hand or anything. And then people would ask me to come out and speak to their groups. Never made a penny for it. I just enjoy speaking. What I made out of it was that it was going to make a difference in people's lives. Today I'm going to talk about the power of voice. Our voice, your voice, and how your voice can lead you into the next step in life. Thought I would never be able to do anything. My voice has took me across the globe. Today, I speak to presidents. Yes, I sat at the dinner table with President Barack Obama. I've spoken to the Pope. And the reason why, it wasn't because I was a good athlete. It wasn't because of the color of my skin. It wasn't because of where I came from. It was because they chose me, that they know they can trust in me, and they could say to me, Loretta, you have the power of voice that's helped changing how people are going to be respected and treated. I use my voice that somebody like me, the youngsters coming up today, older people still today, senior citizens who have intellectual disabilities, they still need rights to be fought for. The right to better health care, the right to live in an apartment, the right to be able to work. Young people, you as an individual have a voice. Please use that voice. If I could just make this world better by just doing one little thing for somebody else, it is worth it. I have this joy that I share with others. If you can talk to one person and change that one person's mind, then that'll spread to 2 or 3 or 4 or 100 or thousands. So if I could just change 1 or 2 minds, hopefully it'll spread on to more.
Wow, what a truly inspiring video and story. Thank you, Ms. Claiborne, for joining us today and sharing your experiences. As someone growing up in the same city as you, hearing your impact on others, and occasionally seeing you jogging around town, I am thrilled to hear your story, just like many others on this call. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just came from the YMCA, so sorry for the way I'm dressed. But, you know, when you work out, you have to go what you have to go with. I know I don't go to church like this, put it that way, or to court. But anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm going to start at the beginning when my mother had me. But before I even start there, I'm going to talk about my mother first. My mother was a big, broad woman. And we talk about discrimination. Well, in her case, it was because of the color of her skin. She went to an all-black school here in York. I still remember her going to Smallwood School, and she had this principal. Then the other black school was Quillo Howard. And she used to tell me stories all the time when I was little. She'd be doing my hair. She'd say, bend your hair over, I'm pressing your hair for church. And I remember the stories that she would tell me. And I remember this principal she had, Mr. Grayson. So I said, tell me the story about the book again. And she would always tell me the story. The teacher would instruct her, Miss Claiborne, everyone, find page 6. So then all of a sudden, everybody would find page 6. And my mom would put her hand up, Mr. Grayson, I don't have page 6. He says, well, you don't have page 6. You find somebody who has page 6. You know how it is. We get secondhand So I thought about those stories that she used to tell me when she was a kid. And I used to say to her when we would watch a movie, and I said, Rita, was that really true that you couldn't go to the same school as everybody else? Yes, it was. As sure as I'm sitting here, that's how things were. And you better be grateful that you can go to school. Well, I never understood. So as time went by, it came my time. I started to grow. I didn't walk to the age of 4. I was born blind. I had evidently shields over my eyes, and still today I can't see you with both my eyes at the same time. So when my right eye is reading something, my left eye is reading something, my right eye is taking a break. It's People say, how can you see like that? I said, you ask a man how he or she can get around being blind. You learn to navigate, but it doesn't make me any different. So as time went by, I really learned that those stories were true about my mother, but I didn't think that I would have a problem. Well, I entered kindergarten, I was held back. I entered first grade, I was held back. I entered second grade, I was held back. Then I had the Wicked Witch of the West. If you all watched the movie called The Wizard of Oz, you remember the mean witch. Well, this teacher was like that. I'd come in her class, I would sit down, and yes, ladies, we didn't wear slippers to school. You wore a dress that was proper. Young boys wore a pair of pants. There wasn't even shorts, even for the hot time. So I'd come into class and I would sit, knowing that I would struggle. Now, this lady held me back 2 years, and she knew that I wasn't her perfect student. So as time came by, she would look at me and says, you, dummy, to the wall. And I got mad. And so my friend Marky got sent to the closet. And we would sit there. You'd see the coats hanging, and then there was a shelf, and there was cookies in a big box. Even though I couldn't read, I knew that was the cookie box, because every day at 2, they would have a break. So I looked at my friend Marky and I said, why are you in here? Because I was talking. I don't know why she always picks on you. She didn't even give me a chance. So she called me out one day. Before she called me out, I looked at Marky. I said, do you want some? He goes, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not going to get in trouble. So I sat there, I pulled that box down, and I ate all the graham crackers I could eat. You think I'd hate graham crackers today? She calls me out in her class. She looked at the clock and see that it was only a minute till class would end. And she would say, you can come out now, dummy. I'd never done nothing in her class. She was just discriminating to me. I knew it wasn't about the color of my skin. And we talk about discriminations, usually somebody's skin or somebody's religion that they believe. It's many different things, the sexual orientation, that type of thing. Well, I came out that day and I threw up every cracker she evidently that would come up. And she looked at me and says, you're not a dummy after all. So then my mother had me tested, and she was having this process go through as time would go by. Well, there was a special education class, but then my mother said, well, there's a school here. I'm going to send Loretta to Ferguson, because automatically Jefferson was closing and got shipped over to Ferguson. That was the best teacher I ever had, Mrs. Reaver. And she didn't discriminate. She didn't care how fast you learn. And I remembered her telling me about the principal, about the ugly black retarded girl that she's going to get. And she turned around and she told me this many years later. She says, Loretta, I'm going to tell you something that might hurt your feelings, but I think it would be good for you to know. And when she told me that story, I sat there and cried. I said, why? Why? And it wasn't because of the color of my skin. It was because the way I learned. So as time went by, my mom fought for me and fought for me. Most people like me were put into institutions. I see my friends disappear one by one. Where's Tony going? Honey, he's going away. Where's so-and-so going? Oh, she's going away. And she would say under her breath as she's doing my hair, or I'm doing dishes, and she'll sit there playing cards and says, yeah, they think they're going to get you, but I got news for them. As long as Rita Claiborne's living, I'm going to raise you. And as time went by, her dream was for me to get a diploma, and not just any old diploma, because special education students got a diploma, but it says Loretta Claiborne has attended her classes at York City School District. My mom wanted my diploma to be the same as my sisters and my brothers. My sister and I graduated the same year. And when I got my diploma, I did not want to go on that stage. I didn't want nothing to do with that. She says, let me tell you something. You're going to go on that stage, you understand? You worked very hard for it. You didn't have to be the best, but you worked hard for this. I fought for you to get this. And I want my dream to become a reality. That day, I walked across the stage. I turned my tassel to the right side of my head like the other students did when I was instructed. When I got off the stage and we got home, my mom opened my sister's diploma and she opened mine. And she said, that's what I want. I was discriminated, and she would say to me, you know what? I had an issue because of color of my skin. You got it double hard. Not only because of the color of your skin, and I would say triple. Number one, because you're a woman. Number two, might be the color of your skin. But number three is going to be the biggest one because the way you learn. So as time went by, I graduated from high school. Her dream was achieved. I'd been in Special Olympics because I was in a school to work program, and every other week I would go to the workshop. That was a place where people like me were supposed to spend the rest of their life if you were in the community. But most people, like I said, were still out in institutions. And when I look back, I look back at the time when I went to school and I tried to start the track team. And I got told, oh, we don't want no retards on this team. I had a teacher, her name was Mrs. Kasiba. She taught regular ed, but she decided to take us, small group of girls together, and says, we're going to have a little team. So we had to have a petition signed. It was that the other girl says, we want you to go to the teachers and get the signatures because we need X amount of signatures. And we want you to take it to Mr. Eckenroe, who was the principal at that time. So I get the signatures. I take them to Mr. Eckenroe, and he says, yes, you girls can train, but you cannot train at the field, small field. We used to call it the meadow field. And we said, why? And he says, well, that's private and that's for the guys. You girls can work out in the hall. Well, I worked and worked and worked. And then finally, my cousin who ran track invited us because he was the star runner. Like my brother, when he went to school, he was a star runner and kind of listened to the star. So he talked to Mrs. Kasiba and took us girls down to the track. And there were some boys there and they started teasing me and calling me names. And he says, I'm going to stop this right now. Those boys didn't know that that was my cousin. And he challenged me around the track for a mile. So these boys are running. Within the first lap, they're breathing deep. And I could hear it. And I just kept on going. And my cousin says, that's all right, cuz you could stop. And everybody turned around and looked. And there again, he says, I think y'all learned a lesson. I had no problem how those young men sensed that. But there again, because I was a girl, I got told by the principal that we cannot use the track. Why? Now there's Title IX. Title IX was passed after I graduated from high school, and I was at the workshop. And when I look back, I think about the big part that I took in that in our public school. But yet, I never got no credit for it. Not that I look for credit, but to see girls today being able to have that opportunity. And what really made it tough, I think the principal just wiped it off. Oh, this is one of our special ed kids. She doesn't know. And as time went by, I look back now, this year, 53 years later, this past April, May, I went down to William Penn Senior High School. Yes, they have a girls track team, but they also have unified sports where people with disabilities and without disabilities come together and they form a track team and the points are gathered And they now have something what was my dream. And I told those students, my dream is your reality. The same as my mother. Her dream was her reality because she didn't have to wait years. She fought for her daughter to graduate from school. And when I look back at these young people, I tell them I'm jealous. It's called a happy jealous that they had these opportunities and utilize them. So as time went by, I started to get older. And then I would work. In the early 80s, I had a counselor through the ARC, and she noticed something in me. And she says, Loretta, why don't you speak? And I say, why? Why should I speak? And no, I never used sign language. I learned that many years when I worked at the workshop. And my counselor at the workshop said, one of the bosses came to me, we're hiring people who are deaf. You notice people first. People who are deaf are going to come to the workshop. So I decided I was going to learn sign language because I had a friend, two friends, and I wanted to learn how to sign to them. And the boss looked at me, oh, you'll never learn that. We're not going to have you work here. We're going to put you up with the other women. I said, I don't want to work with the other women. I like working with the guys here. I'll never get in trouble back here. Why are you moving me? And I proved to him that I could learn sign language. And every time a new person would come, they would say, hey, Loretta, come here. We're going to have the boss show them around and you're going to tell them about your work and talk about the jobs. There again, they didn't have confidence in me. And one of the people really got jealous and says, oh, well, she learned sign language and this and that. And I just looked at him. I said, you know what? You had the same opportunity as I did and more. It was my hard work of going to my little class at night on Tuesday nights and learning at William Penn Senior High School for adults because I was an adult and I decided to take a level farther. I never forget when I was in high school, I took an art class and my mom had this thing because she was so discriminated against. She would say to us kids, let me tell you something, people aren't going to like you. I'm going to tell you now, they ain't going to like you because of your color. They might won't like you because of your gender, but people aren't going to like you. So get used to it. And I remember her saying to me, looking at me and said, yeah, you're going to have a tough way to go. And I would say to her, I hope things aren't tough. But as time went by, I found out they were real tough. And I never forget going to buy a home, the home I live in today, because people like me weren't supposed to buy homes. They weren't supposed to graduate from high school. And I remember the advocate, I'm going to change his name, Mr. William, taking me, and they said to me, well, why do you want to buy a home? I said, because I want to be able to live on my own. Yes, I had living. I was living out in a high-rise apartment, but there were some people who were teasing me, and I was starting to get angry again. And I didn't want to take medication. I just wanted to get out. So I worked and I saved, and I worked and I saved. Then I start speaking, and they said, hey, we ought to pay you for this. And so I said to my counselor, Miss Janet McFarland, who's the true counselor of mine, she says, Loretta, I think you could do this. I think you could do this. But they had no faith. So Mr. William takes me out. I said, I have to get out the high rise. I'm getting in so much trouble. It's not going to be worth it. I'm going to end up jail. I said, or somebody's going to end up and it's not going to be me. I'm going to be the one that's in jail. I need to get out of here. So we worked and we discussed the finances. They made the movie on my life. Now we're talking about 1999, 2000. And that's where a little revenue came. And he sat me down and we talked for weeks. Well, this is what you can do, Loretta. You made enough. You're not going to make a lot of money from this, but you'll make enough to get out of the apartment. Do you want to live there or do you want to live? I said, I'm going to try to get a place. So people are very important in your life. My best friend, Miss Becky, and her husband sat down and talked to me. So we worked on this for months. And we found this little place that was affordable. And I got here, but it was not easy. I never forget going to the first place. It was in southern York County, and it was a place to look for houses. And we saw this little house, and we went there and sat there. And my advocate at the time says, something's not right. So then the lady looks and says, can I help you? Well, she looked at me, and then she looked at him, and I looked at him. I said to him, Mr. William, let's get out of here. Let's go. I said, she has a problem. I know what it is. I said, because I didn't speak 2 or 3 words. It was because I was Black. I said, we can go elsewhere. So we trucked around and we found the people that we saw another realtor sign. We went from one place to the next. Why? Why did I have to travel from one place to the next? So finally, I got the home. Paid for it, fixed it up, nickel and dime myself, fixed it up. So it's livable. I never forget when I first moved in here, a mouse crawled in the door and looked at me like, oh, who are you? And I was like, oh, no, I can't deal with mouses. I can't deal with this. So I got away from it and got doors put in, things like that. So a couple years later, I purchased my home, paid for it outright. I didn't have much in the bank, but I had enough to take care of myself. And I went to the bank. And I never forget going to the bank. And I looked at the lady and I said, I'd like to get a credit card. This was in 2007, not that long ago, 2007. So I went to her and I went in the back and she said, can I help you? And I said, yes, I'd like to have a credit card. The lady looked at me and said, oh, you don't qualify for a credit card. So I went and I called my advocate and I said, you know, this lady's telling me I don't qualify for a credit card. And he said to me, Mr. Williams says, Loretta, you bought your home from that bank. You paid your home off. You don't owe a bill. I'm looking at your records. You got your taxes and everything in order. You're not that kind of person. So I want you to go back. So I went back the second time. And I stood there in the bank and I sat outside and they said, can we help you? So I go up to the counter. I said, yes, I'd like to see one of the ladies in the back. At that time, there was another gentleman standing there. Evidently, he owed some money or they were telling him, you could tell by the body actions in his voice. And of course, you could hear, obviously. So the lady calls me back and they said, have a seat, Miss Claiborne. She says, how did things go? I said, ma'am, I'm coming here the second time. I like to have a small credit card because when I travel to speak, they are no longer taking $20. When you would go to a hotel, they would have you put down $20 as a safety thing. So if something got broke in the room or something like that, they could cover it. Or somebody took a towel, but they stopped taking money. So I said, I need a $500 limit credit card. So they looked at me and they said, oh, Miss Claiborne, you don't qualify. And I looked at the lady and another lady intervened. And she says, Miss Claiborne, you don't qualify. You don't. I said, ma'am, I'm talking to her, not you. I said, I bought my home here. There's a man out there arguing with a teller because he evidently has some issues. I never had an issue with you. I paid my home off. I got a little bit of money in the bank. It's not that much, but it's more than $500. I said, I'm not here to play a baseball game. What is it? I know it's not the color of my skin. Are you telling me I can't handle a credit card? I said, that's what you're telling me? I said, I tell you what, this is my second time. And if I don't have something in the bank for a little tiny $500 credit card just to use when I go to a hotel, I'll take and go elsewhere. All of a sudden, within days, I come, get out the mail, and I'm reading this thing. You have been approved for $10,000 credit card. So I had to take care of some business at the bank. I go in, and this woman looks at me and she says, Miss Claiborne, did you get your credit card? Loudly across the bank. People sitting and people are looking at me, and I waited. I was so frustrated. I walked up to her and I said, let me tell you something. Don't you ever put my business out in that hallway like you just did. I will come back and I will go to the head. What is your problem? And I knew it was this discrimination, just like when the bank did this to me at the first time. Well, I ended up getting the credit card and I turned around months later and I said, well, do you have any problem with the credit card? Do you have any? Well, Miss Claiborne, you never use it. I told you I only need it when I speak at a hotel. I don't use credit cards. So as time went by, I knew I was being discriminated. She wanted me to walk away. I knew what my mother had to put up with. I knew what others had to put up with. And so I make it my policy that now I can go out and speak on behalf of other people so they don't have to go through what I went through. We talk about discrimination, and I'll never forget it. One time I was at a conference and this woman sat there and she says, oh, well, I think so-and-so, this is not right. They should have this for people with wheelchairs. And I'm being discriminated against. I turned around and looked at her and she looked at me and said, what do you think, Loretta? I said, let me tell you something. We're all being discriminated against because we have a different ability. You have a visual disability. I have a hidden disability. So if you think you got it tough, I got it double tough. I said, I'm discriminated because of my color, because of the way I learn, which you cannot see. So that's a double in a sense. And because I'm a female. But we're here to speak and advocate on behalf of those with different abilities. And I've even seen it in the boardroom. I serve on the board of directors for people with disabilities, a group for people with disabilities, which I participate in very, very big. So they asked me to serve on this international board. And I'll never forget it. It was just a couple of years ago. I'm sitting at the board meeting. We had an executive committee meeting just about to start. So at the board meeting, I give my presentation about this place that made a bid in the western part of the country. It was California. We had to go out and see UCLA and we had to critique. I served on the bidding committee, which when they have a big Special Olympic Games, they have to have people go out and look at the place where they're going to have, is it safe? If it's suitable, is the staff ready to work for people with different abilities? So we went to UCLA and I said, I'm writing down on a piece of paper, well, I said, the bunk beds have to come down because we have youth and we don't want it to be a fire alarm and somebody falls out of the bed, gets excited. So that's a hazard. So I asked the people at UCLA in the rooms, can you put the beds down in a single? And they said, oh, sure. So I had no problem with that. We went through, it was a pretty closed conference school because it's up in the hills. So we get to another school, USC. And I'm looking at the school. It's a fine school. We went through, meals are great. The staff was ready. They were educating their staff, having people come in and doing disability awareness, how to talk to people, always use people first language. And I never forget going through the campus. I said, we're going to have one problem. So in my report, when I went back to the board, I said, UCLA was a great school. It's going to do well. USC is a great school and it's going to do well, but we have one problem. It's an open campus, which means we could have anybody walk in that campus and not know. So I think that we should have better security. And I don't want it to be like when I was in Greece, walk in the hotel and people are standing there with guns and it was scary. We want these games to be a great games. So in order for them to be a great games, is there any way that we could have the federal government work with us? And they do. And we went to the federal government. They had people come in, local police hired extra people, and it ended up being a good event. So at the end of my report, a gentleman down from me says, hey, Loretta, USC, back in the 40s when Black people didn't get college educated, it was very hard. There was a woman who was very successful there. And I'm listening to this story. I'm cleaning up my things. And this guy across from me, which I knew was a bigot, because he did something to my friend. He made a comment to my friend years earlier when I was on this board. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Loretta." And I'm sitting there putting my stuff up, getting ready to take my trash from, my cup up to put it on the thing. "Hey, Loretta, what do you think that lady got that money?" And I look at him. I said, "Excuse me? That colored lady, did you think she stole that money to go to college?" Whoa. Really? I had a cup sitting there and I was about to throw it at him. And then something came through my head. I could show my class. I could put it this way. You can read through the lines. I could show my backside or I could show my class. And today I'm going to decide to show the later. And I looked at that guy and I said, "You're a lucky man." I said, "Because I was going to throw this cup at you. But I decided I'm not going to show but I'm going to show my class. I will deal with you later." Discrimination, whether it's in buying housing, whether it's anything, getting school, getting a place to live. A lot of people with intellectual and mental health issues or any kind of disability are still discriminated. It wasn't long ago, back in June, I got attacked. And the best thing that happened after I got attacked and I called the police, I was very, very happy because these cops came and I was really, frustrated. I was hurt. I wasn't, understanding the language that they were using. They had a policeman that came out that worked, I guess, with people with ID because he had me before in another incident. I had somebody stalking me years ago. And he says, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he was able to break down the lingo. In other words, the words or the terms, the terminology that police use. It's just like anything else. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, "Oh, well, you have this, this, this." And I looked at the doctor one day and I said, "I don't understand what you're saying." And she looked at me and she says, "Oh, well, you had," I said, "Could you break the wording down?" And so I looked at her. You know what I did? I looked at the doctor and I said, and she looked at me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Now, do you understand what I said to you?" I said, "What do you say to me?" In sign language. Now you understand. You didn't understand what I said to you. But when you talk those big words, I didn't understand you. And that's why I did that. So can you break it down and make it easier? I had no problem. And when this policeman came and they start talking lingo, this guy comes up to me and he breaks it down simple that I could understand. And it's hard. And especially somebody with ID, because there are very, very bright people with disabilities. I just spoke for the Federal Reserve and I met a guy there last Wednesday. I flew into Texas, left on Tuesday, flew out to Dallas. He picked me up in the airport at 12 a.m. in the morning. I get to the hotel, I rest up, and he was deaf, and we talked, and I said, "I won't talk to you while you're driving." And we had a blast. He works for the Federal Reserve, and one of his things is to make sure that the Federal Reserve, which governs banks, has more people, and for them to be able to accommodate and use the right structure so that people with disabilities can work for the feds. So yes, when you have people like him, he's making a difference, and we need to advocate for each other. So those of you, when I say advocate, it doesn't mean speak for someone. It just means speak on their behalf. And when we learn to advocate for each other, it'll be a much, much better world. And especially in the world today, when I look and see a lot of jobs are having a tough time getting people to work, even the Federal Reserve, that if we give people a chance and stand up and listen and not talk for someone, but just be there as a help or a support, things will be much, much better. So that's what my job is. I go out and I advocate for people. Like I said, I just spoke to the Federal Reserve last week, and things will be better once we start to stand up for each other. I always say it's not for me, but it's for me and the next person and the next generation. If you have a voice, use it. I thought I'd never have a voice. And today I have that voice, not because of Loretta, but number one, because of my God that I believe in, because of my mother, because she was a strong person, and people who helped me along the way. You can't do nothing without each other. And it's okay to ask for help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Claiborne, for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us all. From your mom standing up for you and you using your own voice, it really just paves the way for other generations to follow. So thank you for sharing that with us all. I'll now open it up to see if anyone has any questions or comments. Please feel free to take yourself off mute if you want to make a comment or ask a question, but I'll be monitoring the chat to see if anyone has anything to add. So I'll just give it a couple of minutes.
And thank you to the signer who is signing.
Getting some comments in the chat. Someone says, remarkable. Wow. Thank you for sharing your story. You spoke to my class when I was in elementary school, and it always left an impression on me.
Oh, that makes you feel good.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Very uplifting and inspiring. Thank you. Awesome story. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'll give it a couple more minutes to see if anyone else has anything to add before I log it off for today. You are truly an inspiration, Miss Claiborne. Thank you for your story. I saw the movie based on your life years ago.
Where they didn't have me graduate from high school. That was my mother's dream.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It means a lot to all of us to get to hear from you directly. Just a quick question. I guess I'm curious to hear, since you have been doing this for a long time, what types of things do you feel have gotten better over time? And as you look forward, what types, what are your focus or initiatives or things that you still want to see changed or still working on as we move forward?
You know, I've seen a lot of change in our youth in schools because of a program called Unified Champion Schools, where we go into the schools, and I hope soon that they will go into the elementary schools in some places across the country. They are where they start as a little club with kids with and without disabilities come together for maybe a half an hour, and they meet each other, and they find out at the end, just because Jason uses a wheelchair, that Jason is very smart, or just because Johnny uses a guide stick, boy, he knows as much as I do. So kids to get to know each other, and that's when you break down the barriers of bullying. And as they get into middle school and high school, they have what they call unified sports, where a person with or without a disability are matched up together and they run on a track team The regular ed student runs against other regular ed students, and they're not looking for the best athletes to do this. They're looking for the athlete who would like to do sports but never qualified for a team, but has an interest in sport, but also interest in learning about others. So we're seeing the results that are breaking down the stereotypes in the schools, and it's working so much that the US government is giving schools. We actually get funding from the government to have more initiatives in our schools. What I like to see better for people with ID is the protection of the law. There's really no safeguard for people with ID. I was attacked in June, and a guy threw a brick at me just by out the corner of my eye, because I have this peripheral vision. I'm riding my bike with a cup of coffee in my hand, and I looked at this guy. He was deranged, and he goes across the street, takes a brick, throws it at me, and I just seen it, and I duck. He didn't get me, but then at that same time, he ran down the street, attacked the guy coming out of his car, got away. As I'm going down the street and coming back, he hid behind the car and he shoved me off my bike physically. So he thought it out. And I was very upset when I said, when I got the papers back and I had to go to court, that was only simple assault. First of all, he assaulted somebody who was a senior citizen. Second of all, with a disability. He could have killed me. And I looked at the DA and I said, how is this simple assault? Well, you didn't get hit with the brick, but wait a minute. He sat back and he physically attacked me. Now, I can't speak for the neighbor. The neighbor came up to me weeks later and said he didn't see me and he wanted to see me. And he told me the same guy jumped him. I said, the laws, there's something failing in the laws. Because if he would have hit me with that brick, it would have killed me, because I had brain damage from my mom having an accident when she had me. She fell down the step. So I like to see tougher laws for those with disabilities and the aged, what we call senior citizens. That is one of the things I like to see change, just like they changed the laws about if somebody sexually assaults a kid, that they can be held liable years later. And I think the laws need to be better to protect those with different abilities as well as our seniors. And this gentleman has, I shouldn't say gentleman, I would say this young dude happened to do something to somebody that was actually open record, because my sister looked up that he has attacked other people and they were all seniors. My neighbor was a senior, I'm a senior, and the other guy why is he walking on the street? So I like to see better protections for people with ID and other disabilities as well as our aged.
Thank you for your response to that question. Does anyone else have any other questions that they would like to add? All right, well, I'll be respectful of everyone's time. I know this is supposed to end at 2, but if there are no other further questions or comments, I'll go ahead and close this out today. So thank you on behalf of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission for joining us today, Loretta, and sharing your story. Truly inspiring, and I know that it inspired many of us on this call as well. So thank you for joining us. I want to remind everyone of our next virtual lunch and learn. It will be held on Thursday, December 14th from 1 to 2 o'clock. Our guest speaker will be Renita Miller, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Once again, thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
And thank you.